all the way in the corner.
Might have a few more people trickle in.
Can you go to Four Corners real fast?
But,
What am I?
thanks everybody for coming, really appreciate it. I'm Andrew Gibson, I'm president of the ONA Mizzou Association Club here. We've got 4 other exec members hanging out. Wave everybody. Thanks for coming. We're the school's digital journalism club, and we hold workshops like this all the time. That's kind of what we do. And there are plenty of opportunities to get involved with helping plan things like this, so if you are interested, talk to any of us after the event. But of course, we're here now for online portfolios, which we're really glad that you're here. This is a very casual event, very flexible. The way we kind of envisioned it would work is we would let our 3 news pros here take 10 minutes or so each to talk about what they look for in portfolio sites, do's and don'ts, and show examples. And then the last half will be dedicated to any brave people who want to come and put their portfolio sites up on this laptop and get some critique and feedback. So anybody is welcome. So with that, I introduce Rob Weir. He is the Director of Digital Development for the Missourian. We're building right now. This is Vivian Abagiu, did I get that right? Photo editor with the Columbia Tribune. And Annie Hammock, who's the Interactive Director at KOMD. So if you want to all fight it out to see who goes first, go for it. But hand over the floor to you.
I will sit right here. I will start. Let me call up the site, and then I will start talking. How many of you guys are going to Atlanta for the ONA conference? A couple? I'll be there. Make sure you're looking up. So I reached out, rather than just deciding to look directly at portfolios, good and bad, which I hope I have time to get to. I reached out to a lot of my former colleagues at CNN and some other digital journalists and hiring managers, because I thought the hiring managers part would be good. And I asked, what are the must-dos and the please-don'ts of portfolio building? A really interesting conversation started about the need to know code. Because you're thinking in terms of what my content is, but on the technical side, how much code do you need? Because we are dragging and dropping and Weebly and, sort of WYSIWYG stuff and, what you see is what you get stuff and WordPress. And I was just curious that this conversation started, and it started with Derek Willis, who's an interactive developer at the New York Times. And his first thought was, he thinks you guys are doing too much in portfolio work, that you're not, it's like, oh, I don't think they need to spend that much time on it. But then he said something which I found really interesting, which is, if you can build it yourself, you should try to do that. And if not, try to do as much of it as you can yourself, because hiring managers on the interactive side, the online side, they want to see that you can work outside of these sort of pre-built drag and drop kind of programs. Interestingly enough, some other people chimed in and said, use your portfolio as a good way to practice your HTML. They offer classes in it here on campus. I don't know, Amy, how much do you guys do in HTML?
In convergence right now, not a ton, but we're always looking at the possibility of bringing it back. But there are free courses you can take too, we do it in different programs on campus, like on a weekend that you can come in and kind of catch back up. And hopefully when Rob talks too, we will make a huge pitch for the class that he teaches, which is invaluable in learning that kind of stuff.
So it was a little bit surprising to me that there was so much discussion about it. So yeah, build as much as you can in your own HTML. Derek was a little, these, Weebly, Wix, WordPress, 1 million people can do that. It proved that you can sort of step outside that and work on it. Matt Waite, who's the founder of the Drone Journalism Program in Nebraska, politely disagreed. But also said he believes that you should at least do something outside the confines of putting up your photos and putting up your videos. So they went back and forth about, the drudgery of HTML versus the ease of, just letting someone else do the heavy lifting for you. And Derek, the New York Times guy, said, I think it's just drudgery is important. Because a hiring manager is going to want to know, you can look at code and know where a mistake is, or be able to go, oh, well, that's why that's not displaying right, or here's some code that I can copy and paste off the web and know how it's going to look on my site. You'll find working in WordPress, if you know that you want to do something that's not in the graphical display, that you can get into the HTML display, and you can find the appropriate code on the web and stick it in your blog, and suddenly there's a nice little feature that didn't exist before. So Matt at the Drone Journalism Lab started talking about stuff, i.e. your photographs, videos, etc., and the thing that you put it on, which is the platform that you put it on. And he thinks that, doing that is probably more important than HTML. So even in the industry, some real disagreement there, which I found interesting. They kind of had this back and forth, so I'm just going to since I only have 10 minutes. And then Will Haynes chimes in, and he makes the best point, which is it doesn't matter if your content sucks. That's the bottom line. Is your content good, and have you displayed it to the best effect? Just visual impact carries a lot of weight, and if you've ever been to a website and kind of gone, for a second, and then you sort of make this gut decision whether you're going to stay on it or not. And, employers will make that same sort of subliminal, not even, subconscious, they don't even know they're doing it, kind of reaction based on what your website looks like. So speaking of content, this idea of what's on your website and wanting it to stick out. A guy named Steve Budry works for a company called Digital First Media. He had some really great examples of things that you can do that show you can work with digital tools and sell yourself at the same time. I think a lot of us don't think about it, but he had a potential employee. He asked, what can you do for me? And she actually created a graphic that sort of was based on a map of Washington, D.C., where she tracked the connection of things that she could do. Monitor breaking news, maintain a blog, generate ideas, that's all on one line. Whereas, she's flexible, efficient, that sort of thing on another line. And she just took this great visual image to say, this is what I can do for you. And that's a real standout kind of thing for you to think about for your portfolios. Again, she's working with a tool, and yet she's doing it in a way that helps her get the job. What Steve has done, which is kind of interesting, is he's used Facebook timelines and other social media to basically illustrate how people who are looking for jobs can build online content for themselves. And he actually created a pin board for himself on Pinterest, which is just one more way to show that he's social media savvy and yet highlight his work at the same time, which I thought was really interesting. And then this is probably my favorite, is he used Google Maps to show where he's worked. Now, he's worked a lot of places. This is every presentation he's given, but you can click on a dot and, he attended a Newspaper Association of America convention in 2006. He's got a lot of plot points on here. But it is kind of a fun thing to think about. I mean, you have a plotted path to your college career. You've covered a fair number of stories. Even if your map is limited to Columbia, you could still do, I did this story in this neighborhood, and I covered this issue here. And you could, but what this really is cool about is then it shows that you know how to work interactively with tools. I thought that was a really cool idea. And then did this sort of same thing where he took his career and tracked it, but he did it on a timeline. Website called Intersect. If it will load, because this one's a little bit slow. But he did a timeline of his career, and it's, again, you're pretty new at your career, but it's something to think about. So, you know, you click on here and you can see what he's doing in 1989. He started at the Kansas City Times, and then, let's see, September of 1989, something else happened. Anyway, I had the other dates here and I can't find them now. But that's not good. Maybe it's my browser's coming up, I can't tell. I think my browser's not gonna load stuff. Anyway, it's really cool. But just think about those sorts of ideas. And the idea that, you know, Steve said, the presentation is important, but that's just the flair that gets people to pay attention. You have to be able to back it up. And Nathan Byrne, who is newly from Newsy and now is working here, makes the same sort of point. It's great to be creative with your portfolios, but don't oversell yourself. Because they're going to know pretty quick if you spend 6 months working on an interactive map and then they start talking to you about how many interactives you can do in a week, they're going to get a clue. So you need to be experienced with these tools if you're going to use these tools. Don't just do it as a one-off just for your portfolio, but really learn the platform and the tool that you're using. Aaron Pilhofer, also from the New York Times, said, you know, by the way, he actually does look for good and bad, so it does matter. And then I got a conversation on Facebook with CNN folks, some of them former, and some of the things they said was they want to see things that you've done that aren't just things you're passionate about. It's really easy to do content when we love our topic. It's not so much to do good content when it's something you're kind of like, it's important, but it doesn't really interest me. And he said he wants to see you do that because it stretches you a little bit. And Andy Dickinson, who's a favorite blogger of mine, sort of said the same thing. Find stories outside of what you know, because they will be able to sort of suss out if you're sticking to what's familiar and comfortable to you. There's always, as Rob Kemp said, if you have a grammatical mistake or spelling mistake or punctuation mistake, they're going to notice, and it's going to look terrible. I mean, have 5 different people look at your portfolios to copy edit them. I'm actually showing you something now that hasn't been copy edited, and I'm praying that I'm practicing when I preach here, that I haven't made any errors. But I would normally not publish something that I hadn't had at least 2 people look at. I don't trust myself, right? And then completely non-portfolio related, but they chimed in with this anyway. If someone calls you, you better know what the news is, because you're news producers and content people. You have to know what the news, and you know, it's like if they quiz you on the news, you need to know what the news is. And then I love this from Lisa Henry, who's a producer I used to work with. If someone asks you about the news and you just give your opinion on that issue, they're going to look at you and go, oh, he's awfully opinionated, she's awfully opinionated. But if you can spout off a lot of facts about that issue instead, as Lisa says, they're going to recognize the journalism instincts there. So that's kind of completely separate from portfolios, but I thought it would work. So that's what I did just today, throwing this together. I just realized that all the blog examples that I was going to show you are on my laptop and not over here. So I'm gonna maybe hand it off to someone else, and maybe I can get my laptop hooked up in a few minutes, and while they're talking, and then I can come back and show you some sites I love. Really easy to find bad sites and bad examples, but I want to show you so that they really stand out. Okay.
Does that computer have PowerPoint?
It does have PowerPoint, yes.
All right. Hi, everybody. See if that works. Yeah, this Oh, okay, we're good. So, I went to school here, I graduated in 2010, degree in master's degree in photojournalism, and so I'll be approaching this photo portfolios for those that are interested in that perspective. I don't know how many of you are here, but some of the stuff I have to say is general too. Should apply to everybody. Okay. Thank you. So at the Tribune, we just went through a hiring process. I got there in May, and a good friend of mine who's on staff decided to change careers. So I looked through about 40-something portfolios recently. Our new hire, Nick, just started last month. So I have a lot to say about what you should do and shouldn't do with your portfolios. And the main thing that after looking through a lot of them was clarity. It's so important, design, getting to your content. Content matters, yes, but if it's very difficult for me to see your work because of your website, I mean, there's that 6-second window on average of what employers, how long they look at your work, and they make that decision. Am I going to keep looking, or am I just going to go on to the next person? So, you know, if you think about it, 40-hour work week, I had the position advertised for 2 weeks. I didn't want too many applicants. I wanted just good applicants to come in. So during my normal work schedule, I would look at portfolios and then get back to work and look at portfolios, and you have to keep that in mind. So clarity was really important. I mean, your name, your contact info should be on everything you send in to a potential employer. PDFs are much better, in my opinion, than Word docs when you send in a resume or a cover letter. Because PDFs, you can edit them, and they're just, I don't know, they slow down your computer. A document you can edit, and it slows down your computer and open up Word, but Adobe is really fast. I find it easier. Another thing to consider is having your content viewable from the homepage. There's that debate versus having a splash page that kind of shows an image, but it's not in your singles category or your. I several applicants who gave me way too much. Don't throw it all in there, throw in the best stuff. When I get to a website and I see a dozen different galleries and each gallery has 20 images in it, my first thought is, I don't have time for this. This person should have edited down their work. Why should I have to sift through dozens and dozens of things? They're not showing me their best, they're showing me everything. And that's a waste of my time. Because as at a newsroom, you want someone who can make those decisions, who knows what has news value and what doesn't. And that's who you want on staff. So in summary, highlight your best work and really put some thought into how people interact with your online portfolio, because it can be a barrier or it can be the gateway to seeing the best work. And if you notice that you're missing, oh, I don't have as much diversity in my portfolio as I would like, it's good that you're noticing that, first of all, and you're not saying, oh, everything's great and throwing it all up there. Knowing what you need to work on is so important. And you're in school, you have tons of colleagues and friends that you can look to and say, hey, what do you think of my website? And getting as much feedback as possible when it comes to this kind of thing is going to help you get better. And so, yeah, don't be discouraged if you think I don't have enough in my portfolio, or I'm missing this kind of story or this kind of photograph. Just keep working towards it. I think that was 10 minutes. I really have no idea.
That's
Yeah.
great. Thank you very much.
Okay, so my background here is, like Andrew said, I'm the Director of Digital Development at Missouri, and I also teach Journalism 4502, which is a class called Multimedia Planning and Design, where you learn how to build websites with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And there's some 4502 alums in the room and some people currently attending. Can you raise your hands real quick? I won't look, but was it a worthwhile class? You can nod or shake your head or whatever else as far as taking it. What we try to do in 4502 is to give people the basics for understanding multimedia design and understanding design across platforms. And so, this favorite browser question to me is a little bit silly because stuff just has to work, right? I don't really care. I'm not going to assume that my employer is using something in Safari or Chrome or whatever. It just has to work regardless of where you are. And I want to look at 3 portfolios today. These are 2 people who are pretty famous. And one person who will soon be famous, who's a graduate of ours. And so 3 different people who are all kind of designers, and my bias has been that I teach people interactive design and I teach stuff to designers. And so we look, these are all sites that the people built themselves, and so it's something that, in my class we teach a lot of things about building sites yourselves and understanding how the internet works and being able to build cool stuff. That being said, I think that the point that was made earlier, if I'm not hiring you for a web design job, I don't necessarily care whether you built your own website from scratch or not, right? If I'm hiring you to be a writer or a photographer or, some other job, I don't really care if you have a portfolio. What's in your portfolio is always the most important thing. What the work you're doing that's showing me is really important. But if you're a developer, I don't want you to have a WordPress site that makes me a little bit nervous off the top of my head. So think about, working with your portfolio and what you're doing with it. At least not a WordPress site with a stock theme or something like that, with what you're doing with it. Okay, so this person is she taught 4502 before I did. She worked for us for Vox for quite a while. She's a magazine designer working at St. Louis Magazine, and got a job offer recently at a much bigger place, which she's still in the negotiating process, so I'm not going to mention what they are. But so it's a pretty simple site, and I like that. We were watching Objectified, the documentary, the other day in 4502, and there's a portion in there where Johnny Ive is talking about Apple's Apple's design. And in 2009, he was just in charge of their industrial design. He's now in charge of the entire thing. And he was talking about the iPhone, and one of the things that he said about the iPhone that I really liked was that the physical design of the object is such that everything defers to the screen, right? The deferment to the screen, everything else is sort of like put on the back of the device, it's put to the side of the device, you just have the screen and a button essentially, and everything else is hidden because that's your interface and that's what's going on here. And I think Kristen's site reminds me of that to an extent because it reminds me of, there's contact info up in the corner here, and we have a way to sort this, and we can get to, who this person is and stuff like that. But when you enter the site, when you start here, everything defers to, the design, the thing that's at the top of the page. And as I go through this, I can see magazine stuff, I can see the iPad, edition that was designed, I can see these different things in a relatively rapid manner. For the website, this big web project we did a few years ago for Vox, which was very fun to do. We got some help from the 4502 class. There's some screenshots of that so that that can be preserved, because one unfortunate reality is when you make web projects, you're never sure if they're going to stick around, right? Like we could lose our server and everything could go away and stuff like that. So we have the screenshots of this, and then we also have a little link that we can go visit the site if you want to, so we can see the work kind of as it exists and see the information about it as it exists. A couple of other projects that that she did with us and things like that. And again, I can see some screenshots, see how it looked, and visit the site. So I like this a lot in that it really showcases the strength that she has. She's been a magazine designer, so these are magazine spreads, that she's done for St. Louis Mag. I have a little thumbnail for each of these things, and I can go there. And this was all built by her, and it's not anything that's complicated. It's basically a pretty simple HTML page where you're embedding some images, and there's some JavaScript involved for the sorting of things and for the for how the site actually looks. And because she's applying for jobs as a magazine designer, obviously there's large images of all these different things. There aren't PDFs to download, but I can get a good feel for this, and then if I want to see PDFs later on, I can certainly ask for those or whatever else. But I have this nice high quality image that's telling you something about what it was that was designed here, and then I have all these different ways of kind of viewing the content. And there's a nice wide range of content without it being kind of totally overwhelming, which is really cool. This person, Jessica Hesh, you may have heard of her, you might have. She's a letterer, really, an illustrator, by which I mean that she creates letters. She does lettering for people, and that's been sort of her, her letterpress and letterprints and things like that has been sort of her specialty. But what I like about this is that she's also gotten to be known as somebody who goes to a lot of industry conferences, does a lot of speaking and things like that. So, on this particular site, we have just kind of a sorted list of advertising books, miscellany, identity type stuff. Letterpress is the biggest thing that she does, so it's up here, and then we have contact info and get touch down here, and it's very nicely, it's all very nicely designed. If I dive into any of these things, I like that really subtle navigation where it's just a little bit less, a bit more opaque when you hover over the navigation. So information about this and what the project was about, and what I like about this is that there is, she's not a designer who's looking for work in the sense that probably people compete very much to hire her. But so she's turned this site into something that is kind of a resource also for people learning about this while still kind of building her own brand or her personal brand. So something that something that's kind of cool. You get some information about what the commission was like and about the process that went through doing this kind of thing, and this sort of stuff that's in action. And she also uses this as a blog site, as a personal blog site. We were looking at this post actually this morning in 4502 to talk about type design, and she's done some stuff on here just on her own time. That's projects that are kind of interesting. You can just scroll it down here. Did a series of variations on, she actually was the typographer who did the title cards and the in-scene cards for Moonrise Kingdom. If you guys have seen that movie, had an extremely distinctive feel, and the typography for that, the title cards for that were part of how this worked, or how that worked. And so she did, after that, she talks a little bit about doing that up here, but then she did a set of kind of title cards for The Great Gatsby as well, or things for The Great Gatsby. So there's, this totally unstyled version, and this is kind of neat because it tells you what you can do with, plain unstyled HTML. and then sort of accurate, historically accurate, and just a plain Georgia typeface. So, something that's used on the web and how this is used. And it's kind of used as like, not really a showing off type thing, but as it can be a bit of a teaching tool in terms of like, hey, here are typefaces that were available in the 1920s when this book was written, and when it was produced. Here's something that's kind of like, sort of what we would probably in a cliched world think about. Oh, this is totally Art Deco, right? We just look at the thicks and the thins and look at the difference in the stroke. Here's this done up in like a modern web font for Georgia, and each of those gives you a different emotional impact. Each of you gives you some different information about that, So she didn't design the book The Great Gatsby, right? She didn't design the movie The Great Gatsby. She didn't do any of that stuff. But here are some takes on something that I think is pretty interesting and is kind of cool. And we actually looked at those in class today and talked about the differences among the different versions of this and what we liked and what we didn't like. So a portfolio site, but it also has some personality to it and has some writings that are on it and things like that, and FAQs and process and stuff like that. Lots of resources here for designers, which is a kind of a neat way to, if you have a listing of things that you've used in the past or whatever else, that can help drive some traffic to your site too, and it tells people how you've come to the place where you're at, how you've arrived at the decisions that you are, which is kind of neat. And then Jason Santa Maria is another typographer, and I kind of have a bias towards this, I guess, because it's what we're teaching, and I was thinking about it a lot because it's what we're teaching in 40.02 this week, was typography. And again, not somebody who's kind of like looking for work per se, and his portfolio site's actually in the process of being updated. But the portfolio site here, a little bit similar to what we'd seen before, just kind of like a lot of thumbnails, more information as we dive into that. Gets sorted over here, websites, identity type stuff, letterpress. So if you have something that's got a lot of things, setting up kind of a simple sorting thing, is kind of fun. And then, a little bit of information on the subject of media, if you can read that. Jason Santa Maria is a graphic designer living and working in sunny Brooklyn, New York. And if you get more, then you get kind of a statement about who he is and things that he thinks about and works on and things like that. About the site, other stuff. Kind of about this as well. He has previous embarrassing versions of his site, like back to the Flash version that was first built in 2000. So again, this is this is like, hey, I realize now that this was not the best work, but maybe it was cool for 2000, and I'm going to show it to you anyhow because my personality is going to come through a little bit in this work. And for me, that's a lot of what these portfolio sites are about, is what work can be done, absolutely, but also what can I get for, what kind of a feeling can I get for your personality in terms of this, and what range of things can you show me that you've done? If again, you're applying mostly for magazine jobs, and magazine is what Kristen wants to do, and that's most of what's in her portfolio, but it's also nice to see iPad and web, and especially right now for magazine jobs, if you have iPad anywhere on their site, they just salivate. They're so desperate for people who have that experience and have done some production like that. So I guess as an overall collection of thoughts, I would just say I tend to very much agree that your work is what makes the site. When thinking about, do I have to learn how to do all this code? Well, it's not that hard. I figured it out. You guys can figure it out. It's really not scary, and the coding part of it is not the scary part. The editorial judgment and what you're putting on it and what you've done with your own sites is the part that is the trickier thing. And that's why you're in school for 4 years. You're not in school for 4 years to learn HTML, right? You're learning all these other things. And so putting your best work out there. And again, thinking about the type of job that you're applying for. And in general, the job hunting, and then I'll shut up in a second and let you guys show your own sites and we can talk about it. But in general, in job hunting, it seems to me that a lot of people write a cover letter and they make a resume and then they send that to like 100 places. And that's really kind of a dumb way to approach it, because each of those places is different, right? Each of them have their own personality, each of them have their own way of looking at the world, each of them have different things that you would be interested in looking at or be excited about working with. For the job that Kristen applied for and got the job offer for and was negotiating with, she made a magazine department page about all the reasons why she wanted to work in this particular city, going back to her obsession with Gone with the Wind when she was a little girl, so you can probably guess what city it's in now. But the personality that came through with that was interesting and unique, and that wouldn't have worked to send it to Chicago or Milwaukee or Texas Monthly or somewhere like that. So kind of tailoring what you're showing to different places is totally fine. And I'm not saying have 9 different places on your website, because that's hard to maintain and that's what you're going to do. But in your application materials and the letters that you send and the information that you send along, it's totally okay to edit that stuff and to tailor it to who you want to apply for, who you want to be. Are there questions for any of us? And if not, I think we can let them show portfolios, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
pull those up during my email. And I'll invite those people down to come in and show us through their sites.
Yeah, I just realized this is portfolio, not blog.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, do you still want any comments on the design or anything like that?
Well, it's just right out of the blog spots, for sure.
I mean, do you want to come navigate through, or would you rather us move on to the next one? It's really totally up to you.
Yeah.
Are you alright with us putting that on the, linking to that on the ONA blog?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm gonna definitely make a lot of changes after this.
Don't change the URL.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But unless you can just get tracycgolddirt.com, right?
Yeah.
The blog spot.
Being able to get your name into the URL is awesome if you can. I'm unlucky enough that there's a guy named Rob Weir who works for IBM and has been for like 30 years. So he like, there's like this land rush, right? Whenever there's a new web service to grab the name. So,
I've had this since 05.
so tell us a little bit about what content's on it, or what it is that you use it. Like, what do you want people to see when they go to the site?
Well, I'm using it, I used to use it in 08 I started working as a web content person for a nonprofit. And so I used it to kind of learn how to use a blog. And then in 2000, you can see that there's 2 posts for 2 years. That's when I was in the Peace Corps and we didn't have internet access. And blogs were blocked. So I was unable to blog, but now I'm starting up again for the reporting class that I did in Missouri.
So is this like a merger of personal
Yeah,
and professional
so
blog?
I'm thinking I probably need to split it.
I would recommend that.
Could I still link from a professional portfolio to a blog?
That wouldn't bother me terribly. I mean, I'm kind of out there on this, but to me, the splitting personal and professional is the 2010 version of journalists should vote from the 1960s. I mean, we have lives, right? And I mean, unless your blog consists entirely of making stupid choices, it doesn't bother. Like, it's cool. I mean, you were in the Peace Corps for 2 years. That's awesome. That's a really awesome thing to do. And so you have one blog post for each of those years. I'm not going to say, well, screw her. She didn't figure out a way to get, internet in down there or whatever.
Did you blog about the fact that you could blog?
Yeah, that's what the blogs were. I was like, I'm
Yeah.
the capital with internet.
Yeah.
So that's great. But I mean, personality needs to shine through.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying go back to 2008 and delete everything. I'm just saying, I started the Tribune and I created a Tribune photo editor account so that I could, because I have different goals for Twitter as a photo editor than I would in my personal account. And sometimes you can decide, is it worth having separate or not? Something to consider.
I find a real lack of consensus on that in the industry. It's like 2 very different camps, like, no, like you say, it's never join the 2 and others are, and then there's others like, I should be able to tweet and talk about whatever I want to, and I just really think finding a balance. As far as the blogging goes, I think I've had a lot of the people that I've talked to tell me they like seeing blogs because it shows that you think about the world you're in, beyond I'm focused on this one craft. But it's also good if you occasionally blog about the craft that you're practicing.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Yeah, and I think too that, one thing that you might want to do, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on the design here because it's obviously just straight up a blog spot,
Right.
but if you were to build yourself a portfolio page that showcases individual work, the great thing about a blog is it's the latest whatever you've done, right? But that's the drawback as well, is that they're designed by nature to do that, the reverse chronological thing. Right, so thinking about what are some really cool things that I've written that I can link to, and sure, have your blog there because if people want to read about it, that's great. But link to a couple of posts like, hey, in your resume, I love it when people make their resumes about things that they've written about in the past, and you could make a resume online that says, I was in the Peace Corps for 2 years, read a couple of blog posts that I did when I was there, or read about my thoughts about it when I was down, or something like that. So you could make this a subset, of a bigger site, and keep a blog around. I haven't I just got way too busy when I started building apps and stuff, and I haven't blogged in a couple of years, but when I did, I didn't usually blog about journalism related stuff, right? So if I were gonna say, sure, feel free to read my musings about Missouri football, that's great, but the times that I wrote about something that was kind of an industry thing, like how do we deal with commenters, how do we deal with abusive folks on our website, how do we deal with, payment plans or whatever else, I would probably link to that out of, here's my thoughts on a professional level about some things that you might find interesting or not find interesting.
One of the resume pages that you showed had a lot of links in it.
Yeah.
And I've had several people say they love link-heavy resumes. Because then it's one thing in front of them and they can go to a bunch of different things without actually having to open a website and then sort through it. They like doing that. So here's thing X that I really want to stand out to you.
Yeah, and it shows that you understand the way that the web works, right? Because the web is a web of links. It's called the web because of that. It's not the page. It's the interconnectivity is the whole point. Sure. Yeah, we've been
Great, thanks for sharing your appreciate it.
That's okay, never mind.
You don't want to know? It's up to you.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
It's constructive.
Okay.
That's right. That's cool. Do you want to come down and navigate through it, or do you want me to just scroll through? Or?
You can just scroll through it.
Okay. All right. Here we go. Tell us about it if you would.
Well, I have only been blogging for like a week, so I'm clearly new at this, and I'm sure there's lots of things I can improve on, but yeah, right now it's just a bunch of ramblings of an inspiring journalist.
How important is the URL when you guys are looking at like having a professional looking URL, or like if there's something, or like even like a professional Twitter handle, things like that? How picky are people about that?
I mean, if you can get your name in it, that's cool. It helps with branding. If you can't, that's cool too. I mean, Farouk Atez is one of the best known kind of tech people out there. He writes a lot about feminism and things like that. And his Twitter handle is Fire, and it's like that's his identity on Twitter, right? Okay, it doesn't really matter. Like I know who that is. His website is farouk.et.es because his name was already taken, so it's like a Spanish domain, and that's fine. I mean,
What's his Twitter handle?
Kurafire, Kurafire.
Okay. We talk a lot about this at KOMU because our reporters tweet at us, and there are lines to be drawn. I think it's big booty loves me, that sort of thing's not really appropriate. We don't want that showing up on our Twitter feed as being from one of our reporters. Names are great, but we also have a reporter whose name is Mahir, and his Twitter feed is Mind of Mahir. That doesn't bother me. It's still semi-professional, but, ain't I cool, at ain't I cool, or I love ice cream. That's not really saying much to me about who you are. It doesn't strike me as terribly professional. So I think you have to find a balance. People are going to be judging your credentials sometimes on what name you tweet under.
So looking at this site though, Mackenzie, do you want to talk to Cole, or shall I introduce you? So this is, just so you know, this is a FIG student, one of 3 who are on my FIG. Freshman is coming here completely cold. This is her first blog, right, from or first one at Mizzou from like a week ago that you created. So, you're putting yourself out there, and I want to recognize that. I think that's very cool. So, thanks for doing this early on in your career when you can get some advice here.
Yeah, thank you.
I think that's very cool. I guess the question that I always have is what's the goal for this overall? Like, what do you want this to turn into? Do you want to keep this as you go through your career? How do you want to add stuff to it? How do you want to change things, as time goes along?
I don't know. Honestly, I have no idea what I'm doing clearly, but
That's why you're here exploring things, so it's cool.
I guess in the future, I'd like to sort of improve it and use it to just share my work and have this to sort of post that. I have no idea, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It's okay. So, I mean, a blog, just kind of having a blog on its own and not worrying about building a portfolio site right away. I mean, you're a freshman, you've got plenty of time. You know, you've got a period of time to do this, and it's going to be a couple of years before you're in the newsroom, you know, creating content. The Missouri newsroom, at least, when you're working for the manager. But, you know, I think that the nice thing about the blogs with something like this is it lets you kind of dip your feet in the water. You can play around with the design, you can play around with the colors, you can do all that kind of stuff. And it lets you kind of have a place to talk about the experiences that you're having, you know, and sort of get that information out there and find out what it, you know, it lets me know a little bit about your personality and who you are. And as this goes along, you can certainly link to things that you've done and show things over time, and kind of like the Jason Santa Maria side that we're looking at. It's interesting to look back at people and kind of reflect back on, oh, when I was a freshman, I thought this, and now I think differently, or, you know, here's something that was previously done, and it lets me know about your personality and the way that you've grown and changed over, you know, over time and the things that you've done. So, you know, I think it's cool that you're starting out doing that already, and it's definitely worthwhile.
Yeah, there are people who will definitely say it's not where you started, but that you've gotten better.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, way to start as a freshman, that's huge. Well, great, thanks for letting us show that. Put a nice link here. Looks like we've got a Madison. Do you want me to scroll through? Do you want to come down and navigate?
Yeah, sure, just to see maybe how easy it is to access.
Sure.
Maybe
Sure,
for you.
absolutely.
I don't know.
All right, so tell us a little bit about yourself. If you want.
I started it as a fig blog back in freshman year in 2011. So I've kind of developed different styles over the years now with it, different designs. It's a personal blog as well as my own portfolio with resume and things like that. Because I'm a reporter at the Missourian right now, so kind of my posts are about that experience. So yeah. Different tabs that you can scroll through. A lot of old posts as well on there.
I'm just curious, how did you do the scrolling effect, or is that something that WordPress?
I think it's something that comes with the layout. It's a WordPress layout, but I've changed some colors and things like that with it.
Yeah, it's the way to do it from scratch would be it's basically a multiple pattern image thing with your CSS where your body starts loyal, or you can do JavaScript too. There's a lot of sites that are using this JavaScript before you do that as well now. So don't take this the wrong way, but when I looked at that site, I just assumed that you would be a broadcaster. You know, so, and it's interesting that you're working at the Missourian, so.
Right. I started as broadcast, but.
Yeah, and the reason that I say that is you see that a lot with broadcast. You see a lot of headshots
Right.
and standing in front of, you know, anchor desks and things like that, so.
Okay.
I think that, actually, this is just a small thing, but that font to me is getting lost in the background.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like it was,
Right.
I couldn't read the tagline at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is a PDF that you would download?
Yeah, you
Okay.
can go to it from there, and then also just do like a screenshot of it as well.
So how long did it take you to put this all together, would you say? It's been kind of an ongoing process.
Right, yeah. I kind of change things every now and then.
So one thing that I would say, sorry.
No, go ahead.
One thing that I would say about the work samples is, you know, it's a little bit, it kind of gets to that point that a few of us had to mention about editing, you know, because there's, you know,
right.
here's like all your stuff from the Missourian, right, or the many things that you've done from the Missourian. I mean, God knows, I do not want people ever to see the stories that are from the Missourian. I'm really glad that the archive got corrected. I had nothing to do with it, I promise you. I was totally like thousands of miles away, but something to think about is maybe samples of 2 or 3 of your best things, and then having a separate page that says, here's my whole archive. Because if people are really interested in you, they might well want to read through even those older, somewhat semi-embarrassing things like that. But kind of like what's, you know, it's even, I don't know, if you do this well, it can be done well. It can easily cross the line into cheesy, but maybe highlight 3 or 4 stories and say, why do you think this is the best work that you've done? You know, what was it? Was this a really difficult story to write? You know, there's always the Missourian point where like you get into a bed and you have to call the parents, right? The people who just died or whatever, and that's really freaking hard. So what was it that made that story stand out to you? Why do you think it was something that was really good? You know, something like that. It's always something that's interesting to see about somebody.
Just on the design side, the fact that every time we go to a new page, there's this big picture view and you have to find the content versus going right to the content.
Right, yeah.
Like, I wanna see, I've seen you,
Yeah.
I have a really good idea on that front page, your personality. When I hit those content pages, show me some content, and visuals of your content, not just links.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's a nice looking site. It looks a little more broadcasty on that site. The only other thing that I would say is on the resume page, you know, you have to download the PDF version of your resume. And, you know, the resume was nicely designed, it's just fine. But on the web, again, it might be nicer to just have that, just do that styling on the web as web native text, so I don't have to, you know, if I want to grab something and look it up, or if I want to do something like that, I don't necessarily have to. I can download the whole thing if I want to print it out and keep it in your file or whatever, but I can see it kind of in a more native way, because that also helps with searchability. You know, if you're talking about a Peace Corps, you know, that's something that's indexed with your page when it's like that, and when it's not an image file, which is basically what a PDF is. It's a fancy image file.
Great. Any other comments from anyone? Thanks very much for volunteering your room. We appreciate it.
I do like that it's very bold. Impact.
All right, looks like we've got some photos going on here. Who's the owner of this one?
I love you mine.
You want me to click through? You want to come up here and show us some photos?
You can go ahead and go through it. I have used the Flickr because it's, I mean, I haven't gotten around to being able to put together a website. It's not something I'm really comfortable with, so I kind of keep avoiding it. And I think Flickr is an acceptable platform for kind of meeting photos. The only, I mean, it kind of bothers me, there's not really a good place for contact information or things like that, so I'd be interested to hear.
I got some applications that were through Flickr, and for me it wasn't acceptable.
Okay.
It was hard to, this Flickr setup is really good if you want to overview your work, you know, personal pictures and stuff, but it throws a lot at you visually, and it kind of makes you go, oh, where do I start? What are the things I need to see? And so, there are some sites that offer free websites, like that sameexhibit.com. You can have a free account and upload, it only lets you upload 25 images.
And another thing is like he's on right now, like these aren't any of mine. It's like things that I like of other people's, and that's a problem. Like
You see?
yeah, and I didn't know about that website, so I've always wanted to get around to the website, just never actually did.
Yeah, don't let the fact that, oh, I don't know right now how to build my own website stop you from having a website. You could take that class next semester, but in the meantime, you could do something else and have your work up and displayed in a way that everybody can look at it, and you can send it off somewhere, and they'll see your work and get that contact info and where you're at, what you're doing, what your resume is, things like that. So
Yeah, I think the drawback with Flickr is a little bit like the drawback of just having a blog. It's always like the latest stuff that you have, right? And so it's hard to edit tight, and it's hard to have a presentation here. Like I'm that Mizzou photo, just from what I know about Flickr, I'm guessing the Mizzou photo was the big one just because it's horizontal and it is in that space, right? You know,
Well, no, it's
not
going
big
back
pictures.
over.
Yeah,
But yeah.
but I mean, its size relative to the other items on that front page is kind of dictated by
Yeah.
Flickr and not by you, right? So, but I mean, I think 45 is a good class. I enjoy teaching it. We've expanded it because there was so much demand, which is cool. But you also, I mean, there's a number of ways through Do It that you can take kind of the free how to make web classes that are somewhat helpful with that stuff. And almost with that, it's not even, you know, you may or may not learn enough out of that to build your own site, which is cool. But you could at least take a WordPress site and customize it, or you could use one of these other things that are out there to sort of build a more customized version of that site, which is cool.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to throw so much code at you guys at the beginning, but I think largely my point is to be able to customize. If you know basic HTML and you know how to read HTML, then you can do little things to customize a pre-existing site, which is nice little touches here and there. Building something in Dreamweaver or whatever the new thing is, and doing the whole thing from scratch kind of thing.
a little HTML goes a long way.
It really does, and it's much easier
Uh-huh.
than you could ever imagine just looking at it, right? To get to your reel right away. In the meantime, if you don't have a reel yet, I like seeing on the front page really nice, tight, this is me, this is what I can do, bullet points or, something that's not just blocks of paragraphs. A really quick way to see why I need to bother to click through to see the other stuff. I really like, the forget what you use, but the categorization, like it says like reporting, and then there's like general assignment and the drop down menus and things like that make it really easy to follow, because to see also the progression in your career as well.
Okay, here's my website. I'm graduating in May, so I'm actually gonna be like getting a real job, I guess. So honesty, I guess, with no sugarcoating would be really appreciated. So I just have everything separated into different tabs at the top. I have an about page with stuff about me, and then like a tab for my resume. That's kind of an ongoing list of everything. And I have it separated into video, photos, audio, some writing stuff, design, and then contact information. And so videos separated into different sections. Photography is just one page.
So I saw in your about section, if you click back on that your emphasis is in multimedia producing.
Yes.
What job do you want to get out of school?
Good.
So if you go back to your homepage, I want to know, who is this person? Is this a multimedia journalist? Is this a photographer who can also do some other things? Is this a reporter? Like, get that nugget of what it is that you do, so that on the homepage, either right under your name or in that little paragraph section, somewhere off the bat it says, okay, this is what I do. This is what you're going to hire me for.
Okay.
So that I know immediately.
Yeah.
This would be helpful.
Okay.
And given that that's the front page of your site, it's kind of got that splash page feel, like, hi, welcome, click here to see more. And rather than that, what I'm interested in seeing is even if you have the content repeated, that doesn't bother me tremendously, elsewhere. It would be cool to see a little bit less of kind of like a big header and navigation there, maybe minimize that to an extent, and more of what's a cool thing that you've done recently, what's an interesting video that you've done, what's something that's unique that you've been able to do. And it's a bit of a cliche, but it's also reassuring that you see a lot of kids from KOMU. I think that you guys do photo shoots with them in the anchor desk, right, and things like that. But having like the NBC logo there and something else like that there also kind of lends some credibility to your work that you've done. And that's part of the whole goal of coming to the J School, right? Is the idea that like, hey, I've been on an network affiliate, I've been on a big news station, I've done that kind of thing. That might be helpful just in terms of like telling me a little bit more from the get-go about kind of about who you are. So on that front page, thinking about, is there something that's going to grab my attention? Is there something that's going to that you kind of show up front rather than making it go through the navigation to get to where it is I want to go? And I think that it's sensible to have it broken out into different areas, and I think you've done a good job of editing what those different parts are, and I'm glad you're simple JavaScript with those photo captions and those photo rollers and stuff. And so that's cool, but that kind of like on that page, don't make me like land on it and then go somewhere else,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I think splash pages should be, I think you should like get like 3 splash pages in your career, and they should only be when it's like something that's really outstanding to do, and this is more just like a here I am, let me click into something else. It feels like a placeholder instead of something that I'm getting information out of.
This is a little thing, but make sure all the elements on your page are actually working. Like right now, and I don't know whether this is a browser problem, but the error, Twitter did not respond, just little things like that will be noticed. So.
Yeah, the Twitter changes its API like every other day, and so probably since you dropped that into the WordPress thing, you probably have a plugin update or something like that, because it's really annoying the way Twitter deals with this. They have their own proprietary way of displaying their tweets, and it's not just a plain feed or anything, so you want to look at that and make sure things are working before you send it up.
Yeah, I saw a beautiful portfolio while I was looking for things in this class. It was just stunning. And then over in one of the columns was just like, just code where it was supposed to be a photograph, and the photo didn't display, and all the code displayed instead. And it just detracted from an otherwise really nice, interesting, informative front page.
And then another question, on a couple of my pages I have different like subsections, so it kind of goes to like a smaller, I guess, mini splash page. What do you guys think about that? Is that no, or better to have it separated?
I don't mind having it separated, but again, when I go there, it feels like it's an extra click for me, you know? Like, I wouldn't mind seeing a couple of writing samples, again, with maybe a paragraph about them or something like that, a couple of writing samples of things that you've done. And then you could say, you know, look at everything that I did when I was in London, look at my personal blogs, look at my other stuff, you know, elsewhere, a little bit elsewhere on the page, so.
Okay.
You know, I think that this is an example, you know, what I was talking about when I came down and kind of spoke a little bit, like the navigation and the header are what I'm noticing on this page more than anything else, because it's really big and it's a little bit overwhelming. And I realize you're looking at a laptop screen and not a big iMac, but so will hiring managers, you know. So rather than deferring to the content, I'm getting like a lot of navigation, I'm getting a lot of stuff like that in front. I'd rather just like say, no, what's some cool stuff that Amanda's done, and then I can dive into it deeper if I want to do that, you know, later on.
Okay.
Yeah, so it didn't bother me to split out, I just would like to see more of the content over time, I guess.
Thanks. Anyone else? Come on. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for coming, really.
Nice to meet you. Yeah,
Thanks so much.
You're welcome. I was gonna ask you some criticism, probably similar. One of the problems that I have though is I'm focusing on my writing recording. So I categorize everything by place it was published. And I don't know if that's the best way. Probably editing would be better because this is obviously really long.
Yeah.
So
We'll have to talk about that.
taking some of those out, I guess, would be good, but is this the most efficient way to categorize?
I mean, my bias would be that unless you have New York Times in that list or Washington Post or LA, you know, the Columbia Missourian is really important to us in Columbia and Mizzou Mafia know what that is, but you'll be surprised when you go out and get jobs elsewhere, people may or may not know what that is. So I would think about it rather than, you know, Missourian Mandator sometimes. I would think about it, instead of doing that, maybe categorizing writing, and again, what were stories that you feel the most proud of that you were working on? What were the things that you felt were really difficult for you to do? What were things that you did despite being terrified to do them? You know, kind of the story behind the story as far as the writing goes. And a lot of people don't think to do this until later on, and it's kind of too bad. But you know, one thing that you can do as a writer, because when you're writing, you know, your stuff is just the words, and that's totally okay. But to sort of let me know what those stories look like or what they look like, it's always fun to try and see if you can keep a portfolio. And the library usually has these that Missourian students can get. A portfolio of the front page story or something that was a really nice package or something along those lines was the way that we used to do a lot of hiring when I was at other papers and things, you know, to kind of let me know what it is. And you know, I already have that here, but showing that up front with some of the stuff that you're doing is something that could be kind of cool.
So your about page or your front page? Or basically. I'm not loving it because Bass Pro Shops is, you know, it's like, I know you're a social media director, but it's sort of like, this is not screaming journalism to me. You know, Irish Heritage Club, and yeah, I would almost swap it, like social media director, Columbia Broadcast, you know, make that, those first words, the ones that are most directly going to appeal to the employer. You're a social media director, you're a webmaster, you're a contributing writer. Make it about that. So that's just a matter of flip-flopping. But, you know, some more content-heavy front page, it would be more appealing to me, and make your about page a separate page.
Yeah, I tend to think so. And kind of like what you're talking about with Amanda's site, and you said, you know, some of this might be similar. it's kind of that like, and this is okay, I mean, it's kind of that standard WordPress look, which again, if I'm not hiring you as a web designer, maybe I don't really care
I
about
don't
that.
do technology well.
Sure, exactly. But, but there are any number of free themes that are out there that are one-click install type things that might help a little bit just to sort of spice up the typography a little bit and make it look a little bit more modern as far as that goes. And, a little bit like we were saying with Amanda's site too, and you echoed this as well. On that page, what's gonna attract me as a hiring manager, work that you've done, titles that you've had, things like that, more so than necessarily, we've got your we've got your name up there, we know who you are. But it's kind of the biggest thing on the page by a big factor, and that's not as important. If you're Jason Santa Maria and splash your name all over the place, that's still really cool. But sort of letting that be a little bit smaller and letting it differ to the work that you've done, I think is something that you might want to mess around with. So, and Faves is a big deal. I mean, that is a really surprisingly quickly growing service that I think is attracting a lot of interest. But it's something like that, those kind of things that might be something that's interesting to people because it's becoming nationally known, the future of PR and things like that.
So, being a reporter, you are suggesting having the categories at the top being more like types of writing, like religion
I think
reporting.
that makes sense. Religion reporting, features, news, things like that. Because again, unless and Faves is maybe the one that would be, it's kind of like rising there, but again, unless you're familiar with the area, you may or may not know, what that is. Like, that's kind of the way that I feel about KOMU. Like, there's bigger stations and big markets where that name makes a lot of sense. That might make sense to have a navigation or something like that. But kind of categorizing it by type of what you've done is also interesting. And then, on pages, if you sort like all your Missourian stuff together, you can say this is a daily newspaper published blah blah blah, and that kind of stuff is kind of interesting and it's kind of unique. But unless it's like a KC Star, in that group of stuff sort of size, I wouldn't worry about it as much for people. And then navigation, you'll need to clean up the navigation instead of having each story. It's kind of what we were talking about as a theme here. It's just editing what's your best stuff that you've done and provide a link to see everything that you've ever done, but you don't necessarily want to have that on the front, as your main navigation on the front.
This is just a design question. I tend to like really clean design. So to me, I notice fonts,
Right.
and I like nice, clean, bold fonts. So do you think most hiring managers are making sort of subconscious judgments based on the look, or do you think they're just really looking at font?
I think it depends on the hiring manager. For somebody who's hiring a reporter and they're a straight up reporter and they, that's the, like as an editor, that's who they've been their whole lives, it may not matter as much. I mean, you don't want to do anything with fonts that's cutesy, you don't want to do anything that's distracting. This is kind of the monotonous argument, right? That the idea that the font is just the container that displays the meaning, that's totally cool. What I mean by kind of the dated look of this is this was the WordPress theme that came out in like 09, and it's kind of like just all Georgia, which is a fine screen reading font. But something that's a little bit more interesting could also be fun to use there, that is still going to work on a bunch of platforms, but, and that's kind of why I'm suggesting look at some themes, find some stuff that you like. You don't even necessarily have to articulate why you like it. And it doesn't have to be a font made out of bicycles or something silly like that. That's kind of on the other side of turning people off, but something that just looks clean and streamlined, like with the iOS that just came out, you're kind of seeing that movement towards the very, the sort of like back to Helvetica, the thin fonts, the neutral fonts, the things like that that are just neutral and the meaning is conveyed through the context that they're in rather than the typeface itself.
I just had a general question real quick, because you've been saying like buzzwords about like maybe the companies that you've worked for. So say if you do work for somewhere, like I know I interned with CNBC in Europe. Yeah. So if I was highlighting just under news writing, if I had a tab, say like so different tabs for different things, should you put that in front and put the name if it is one of the bigger affiliates and then have your headline, or should you just let them see it?
I think if you've worked at a big place like that, absolutely work it, like on your site, like for what it's worth. Yes, if I had a New York Times byline, that would be like a million times bigger than my name on the front of my site if I were thanks for coming here. I think CNBC, work for something that's sort of a national or an international recognized thing is absolutely something that I would highlight.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm just talking about in terms of how to organize your content. If it's just from kind of lesser known sites, that may not be the best way to do it. So.
Anyone else or any questions? All right, thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming.